formed in the first instance, and 40 years ago I was very privileged to be able to obtain lessons from the late pipe major Donald MacLeod at his workshop in Argyle Street in Glasgow, and I expressed an interest in pipes from Ireland and Northumberland. At that time I'd heard the playing of luminaries such as Seamus Ennis and Leo Rosam, and in Northumbrian pipes Billy Pigg and Jack Armstrong, and I set about trying to find a set, which was very difficult, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
But as it happens, one of Donald's turners in the workshop, the foreman, had experience or knew about a gentleman in Glasgow who had a similar interest, and in fact had made Northumbrian pipes and Irish uilleann pipes. Mm-hmm. Sadly, he had died some 5 years previously, and he took me along to meet his widow, who by this time had moved from Maryhill, where he made most of his instruments, and was staying in Yoker. And when she heard of my interest in being able to play different pipes, she decided that she would like me to have them and look after them and display them and keep them in as good order as I could. And many of these instruments here form part of what has become known as the Hamilton collection.
So there's a large number of instruments.
There was.
You weren't anticipating that, were you?
No, I wasn't, indeed. I think I mentioned in the previous interview that I spent the crossing on the Renfrew ferry in the back seat of my car trying to figure out how many instruments, and there were in total 17 sets. Uh-huh. And mostly Irish, Northumbrian, French, Spanish, Breton, and because of my continued interest in bagpipes from different countries, and also being the pipe major of the Neilston and District Pipe Band, we've had many opportunities to travel abroad, and I've always been aware of different instruments and have managed particularly the Eastern European bagpipes, which we'll come to shortly.
Yes.
But perhaps I could just show you two sets that formed part of the Hamilton collection.
Absolutely, yeah.
The first set were made by Willie Hamilton himself, and they're a flat set in the key of C sharp, mm-hmm. and they have a rather unusual style in the construction of the regulators, with flat keys, flat broad keys, with a design that he made his brand mark, if you like, of stirrup catches to enable the springs to be effective. And the set is made from boxwood, ivory and gold-plated brass.
Okay.
And the second set here is a set of pipes in the key of D, which were gifted to Willie Hamilton by the late Leo Rosam. They became friends many, many years ago, and they exchanged instruments and ideas about the manufacture of pipes. And this is a particularly beautiful set of Leo Rosam, a fine example of his workmanship. And the instrument is made from essentially blackwood, ivory, German silver, and is one of not too many sets that he made of this style, particularly with these pear-shaped regulator keys.
They're different.
They are indeed, yes. And of course these provide the chordal accompaniment to the chanter, which in this case is in the key of D. Uh-huh. I also fell heir to this collection of Irish uilleann pipe chanters, which vary in size and pitch, and indeed manufacturers. This instrument is made by O'Malley from Belfast, and some of the chanters were made by Willie Hamilton himself, and worthy of note is perhaps this extraordinarily long chanter in the key of B, which requires really quite a stretch, as you can see.
Aye.
But it has a particularly soft, mellow tone. Most of the rest of the instruments are either in D or C sharp.
How about reeds for these
Well,
chanters?
they all have to be individually made for the chanter. Unlike if we get a box of chanter reeds in a Scottish pipe manufacturers, we can sift our way through them, and hopefully 9 times out of 10 we'll come up with reeds that are comparable and compatible with the chanters, but also, of course...
But you're really starting from scratch with that, yeah.
Absolutely. They've really got to take a look at the chanter and its construction and then make the reeds accordingly.
Aye.
This is perhaps the oldest of the instruments that form part of the collection, and it's a pastoral hybrid Scottish stroke Irish instrument, and has 3 drones, and perhaps you might be able to see the bass drone here has been, if you like, condensed by using a turn on the outside and a turn on the inside, which enables the bass drone to be, instead of perhaps
long,
more than a metre long, it's condensed in size. The instrument has been carbon dated as the last quarter of the 18th century and made by a maker in Edinburgh called Robertson, from speckled walrus ivory here, and the tulip design of the drone tops, and rosewood, which would have been an indigenous wood of the time. These would have normally been played in places of worship, and the chanters had a removable foot section which could be played off the knee or on the knee, to be played either in the Scottish style or in the Irish closed staccato style. Most unusual instrument.
Aye.
Instruments not too dissimilar from these Scottish and bellows blown pipes from the borders. In other words, they use conical bowed chanters, and I'm thinking along the lines of these instruments, which are from the Iberian Peninsula, namely, and in particular from Galicia and Asturias. And I think it would be fair to say that they are first cousins of the Scottish pipes, inasmuch that, like most of the instruments, they all have a bag as a reservoir, of course, and they vary slightly in the chanter in terms of the number of holes of the finger spacings, the size, the pitch of the chanter. For example, this is an example of a gaita from Galicia in the key of D, which is rather unusual. Consequently, the finger spacing is that bit closer. And the leading note, the equivalent to our low G to an A, is only a semitone, and the high G is particularly sharp, but it can be flattened by cross-fingering. And that's the case with most of these instruments from the Iberian Peninsula, and as I mentioned, particularly from Galicia and Asturias.
The drone system?
The drone system is very similar again, and the traditional instrument is this Galician bagpipe, which actually was made in Glasgow. It was made for me when I performed in the Year of Culture in Glasgow. The last event was a piece called The Pilgrim, and I had difficulty at that time in obtaining a gaita. So a friend of mine, who was a very accomplished wood turner, set about designing his own Glasgow gaita, and in particular his own fingerprint on each of the parts to make up the bass drone here. In fact, the only drone of the gaita. The chanter is similar to a Scottish chanter, but again plays in the key of C. And he made that also, and yes, it was fairly successful.
How many octaves below is that drone?
It's in the same as the bass drone and a set of Highland pipes.
Okay, a couple of octaves below,
yes,
then.
So I could perhaps
Demonstrate,
like
yeah.
sounds.
Mm-hmm.
Is from the neighbouring province of Asturias, and it's essentially the same. It has one single drone and a similar chanter playing in the key of C.
Mm-hmm.
So from the same family of instruments, and it also has the possibility of overblowing on the second octave up to 3, sometimes 4 notes to enhance the scale. And of course, gaitas from whichever province have become extremely popular since the advent of the, first of all, the Scola de Gaita in Orense, which is similar to where we are today, the equivalent of the Piping College here, or indeed the College of Piping in the West End, and caters for, primarily for gaitas, for Spanish, or in particular Galician or Asturian bagpipes, and also bring together the groups of pipers and drummers to form the banda de gaitas. And they have become very popular throughout the world and travel extensively, and have been in Glasgow and performed at the World Championship a couple of times with moderate success, bearing in mind that it's essentially a different instrument but with very close similarities. And but within the provinces themselves, they have their own series of competitions, like we do here with the pipe bands, certainly every weekend from the beginning of May till the end of September. And they have very similar league tables. So that's an example of...
Large number of bands then?
Yes, hundreds of bands.
Perhaps
I could say just a few words about how this collection came to be.
Yes.
These are examples of 2 of the original Breton pipes, one with a bag, the Binu Cos, as you can see. Tiny instrument here, which
very high pitch.
Very high pitch, and sounds.
What pitch is a chanter? What scales?
It would be nominally in B flat, but an octave above.
Aye.
So it's very loud and very shrill, and would be accompanied by the traditional bombard, which is without a bag, and also has the facility to be overblown and played 3 or 4 notes in the second octave.
Yeah.
And together they can play in counterpoint, harmony, and it's very effective. Of course, again, like in Galicia and the north of Spain, the bands decided to adopt Scottish bagpipes really after the Second World War, but they retained bombards, which really means that they were able to maintain the repertoire of tunes, but also play in the same pitch, but using Scottish pipes. The Binu Cos was and is a very highly respected instrument, but it was never thought to be a great marching instrument. Hence the reason that they adopted the Scottish pipes and bombard as their choice of combination. And I think it took some persuading at the start, like indeed it did in northern Spain, but if you look at the popularity of events such as Lorient Festival and Cambert, plus the participation of the bagades from Brittany, who do extremely well in competitions both here and in this part of Europe.
They play to a very high standard.
They do indeed, yes.
Yes.
So these are just a few perhaps interesting items. The first, I hope you've never been the receiving end of this, but I'm sure you'll recognise it, being an ex-policeman yourself.
I've used one of them.
Yeah. Just once, have you?
Oh, just once in 30 years.
It's just a point of interest that several of the bagpipe makers in Glasgow were noted for making policemen's truncheons.
Yes.
Because it was a relatively easy thing for a young apprentice bagpipe maker to make, since there was no holes, of course, and it's solid, and it has almost the same dimensions as a pipe chanter on the outside, so it gave the apprentice an opportunity to be able to make a taper, and the only real thing that was of any great difficulty was the cusps at the handle.
What's the wood there?
This is made from cocos wood,
Aye.
but normally it would have been made from ebony or African blackwood.
Aye, it's too light that.
Yes, it's too light for you.
Aye. What they did with that was the older country, I'm talking a century ago here, would they drill the bottom here.
Put a lump of lead in.
Yeah, put a lump of lead in.
That made it even.
Yeah. So
More
that
dangerous.
sort of evened the odds a wee bit, you know.
And the next job that they had to make was, of course, I'm sure you'll recognise, bowls. And I don't know if you can see the maker.
Lorry.
R.G.
Again,
Lorry.
I'm just going to mention that.
Yeah.
They were famous for their bowls.
Yes, indeed. I'm not a bowler myself, but I understand that they were very well respected, as were, and still are, I believe, tailors of Breton.
Yeah.
Were famous makers of bowls and also bagpipes. And of course they're all
Same
made...
material.
This one's in African blackwood.
Yeah.
It has the weight, of course.
Mm-hmm.
I believe they're all made of composite materials now. And these are just an examples. I don't know if you'd have a hazard a guess at what this might be. This is... well, I suppose you could say it's one of the family of pipes in as much that it has a reservoir of wind here contained in this bulb, and it is in fact a snake charmer.
A snake charmer?
Yes, this would have been used to entice the snakes, and I don't know if I would be able to entice a snake.
There you are. That'd been very good for your belly dancer.
That's right, absolutely. And these are just examples that I've picked up over the years of just an example of how simple it is to be able to get something as basic as a piece of cane from the side of rushes or elder, and with a simple cut to be able to play a vibrating tongue. Which in turn could be used with a series of holes dug out. In this case, I picked up this instrument in Israel in a bazaar, and it originally had two small single-bladed reeds, and it could be played as a musical instrument, as something as simple and as basic as this. And of course, with the inclusion of a bag, then that would extend the playing time, which the whole family of instruments is noted for. I think it's also interesting to note that the earliest bagpipe, to my knowledge, was found on the banks of the Euphrates River in what was Mesopotamia and is now Iraq, of course, and the instrument was a silver divergent double pipe with a horn at the bottom, and was carbon dated at 3,000 years before Christ. I believe it's in the Pitt Rivers Museum, and that's certainly, to my knowledge, the earliest dated instrument that could be noted as being part of the bagpipe family. Okay, so another couple of interesting instruments, Alan. I'm not sure if you would hazard a guess for a similar reason.
It's amazing, that. Huh? Right.
This, well, for the same reason as the snake charmer, forms part of a bagpipe family, in as much that this wooden bulbous part here is in fact a reservoir of air for this, which constitutes a Chinese luchai, which is the instrument that's played with similar wind-reeded instruments at the dragon festivals, at New Year and such events. And there are a series of reeds, vibrating reeds at the bottom of these bamboo canes. And not only can you blow with this instrument, but you can suck and produce varying different note changes. You'll perhaps notice that there's holes in the bamboo canes here.
Yes.
and that allows for changes of notes. So there you are, and here's its younger brother here. It's a bit the worst of wear, I'm afraid, but I'll perhaps get round to restoring it. But an example of Asian bagpipes, along with the snake charmer.
Terrific.
Okay, some other instruments here. This, would you hazard a guess, Alan, where this came from?
Looks like a Beanu type instrument again.
Because of its size. It is in fact from Sweden.
Ah.
This is a Swedish bagpipe known as a sackapipe, and it's played extensively in the central part of Sweden, near the lake Siljan, in particular in Dalarna, where they have many festivals, particularly round about midsummer. And this instrument is played, and it's one of the family of instruments from the Baltic countries, including Lithuania and so on. And they have something similar with, and in this case, they use single-bladed reeds, and just like a miniature drone reed, really, and with a parallel straight bore. And these are often played along with another indigenous instrument called the nyckelharpen. And in Norway, for example, they have the hardanger fiddle, which is could be related in some way to pipes with a drone in the background, in conjunction with the melody, which is played on the free strings. Okay. So, another rather unusual instrument comes from Tunisia and is known as a mezoued, and again it comes from the family of bagpipes, in this case from a young goat, and as you can see the legs have been tied off here and various orifices tied off, and two bamboo cane chanters in parallel with cones made from sheep's horns at the bottom here. And this is indeed a very old and rustic instrument from medieval times and can be heard in marketplaces in all over North Africa, in fact. And it's interesting in as much that they tend to be played with another Arabic instrument called the zurna, which is very similar to a chanter, and in the same combination like the bombard and the binu in counterpoint and melody. Okay. Perhaps we could move on to another group of instruments that come from the former Eastern Europe, and the first instrument here is called a dudi or a gaida, and started life, as you can probably guess, as a sheep, and again had the orifices tied up, and a blowpipe and a chanter added. I may be able to get a squeak out of this one for you.
Unusual.
I'd like to convince you it's a little love song from Bulgaria, but I'm sure you probably know better.
Good.
A similar instrument from Slovenia this time. Sorry, I beg your pardon. From Slovakia. Used to be part of the former Czechoslovakia. And again, this instrument started life as a goat, and the head is a facsimile here, and has a double chanter with the melody played on one side and the equivalent of a drone on the other side, and one extra drone with the horn. Shall I bring these instruments over here now?
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay. This instrument is the most prolific of the family of single-bladed chanter-reed instruments, and perhaps also one of the most complicated. Not the least of which problems is that they make them to be played left-handed, which adds to the confusion. It's just, why did we
Do the other way,
assume
of course,
to play on the other side?
Mm-hmm.
But this is a particularly ornate instrument, and it has been made in the traditional manner to be played left-handed. And it may be of interest to note that when we had the official opening of the centre here, and Prince Charles, of course, is the patron, and I was giving him a guided tour like we're doing today, along with my son Finlay, and we attempted to demonstrate this instrument for him, and it's played in this fashion. Unfortunately, I can't play it left-handed. The truth be told, I can't play it at all, but nevertheless. And Prince Charles announced, I have one of these.
Did he?
I don't know if you've got something like this under your bed, Alan, being a piper, but I don't know many people that have got an instrument like this.
Aye.
Far less HRH.
Well, I've been around for a wee while and I've never seen the lights of it.
Well, he has one, and he assured me that he picked it up on an official visit to what was then Czechoslovakia and was presented with it.
Right, goodness.
And he announced that he believes it's in the loft at Balmoral.
Ah. So the Sovereign's Piper will be playing any time soon.
Perhaps, yes. Playing on what started life as a goat.
Wonderful.
Wait till I see if I can get a squeak for you. Maybe. I'm afraid it's extremely difficult being left-handed. I suppose if I spent a bit of time with it, I might be able to. Would you like to try?
No. I think it protests too much. It's almost real when it's blowing up, isn't it?
No. I'm sure you could have a go at Donald Dougal Mackay.
Good.
And a similar set was presented to me at the Bagpipe Festival in Strakonice in what's now the Czech Republic, from the same family. So these are just a few examples of mine.
So that second set you're handling just now, just the same idea?
It's the same.
Yeah.
It was gifted to me by the festival committee.
Wonderful.
So there we are. So this is an example of an Italian bagpipe, and it's called a zamponia, and it's very popular and often played, particularly at nativity festivals in the areas, well, all over Italy really, but in particular in Abruzzi. And the shepherds generally at Christmas time, pre-Christmas time, come out of the hills along with other instruments known as pifaro or siamara. And the instrument has two chanters. As you can see, it's a fairly large example, and there are even larger versions in the museum here in the National Piping Centre, and various other museums both in Scotland and beyond. And it's a mouth-blown instrument with two chanters and two drones, and as I mentioned, they're played in conjunction with a bagless instrument, and they play again like the bombard and vigneau in counterpart melodies.
I see it has plaque.
Yes, Walter Piber, Dulio.
Okay,
This set was gifted to the National Piping Centre.
excellent.
I'm not exactly sure about who and when. Yes, when was a couple of years ago, and I was asked to be the custodian and look after them, which I'm trying to do along with the rest of these instruments.
Yes, absolutely wonderful collection, all told. Very kind of you to take your time, Iain, today to show us all these instruments, and that's wonderful. We've even got a great example of the Highland bagpipe here just alongside. So, is that your own pipes? Or?
Yes, it is indeed.
Great. Very fine set instrument as well. Okay.
So this is an example of a different genre of pipes that has been copied and originated as the musette de coeur. An example can be seen, an 18th century example can be seen in the museum upstairs and in many of museums in Europe. And as it happens, this particular set is under reconstruction, so I can give you an idea of how the operation of the instrument. It has indeed, like most of the sets here, it has a bag, and in this case is bellows blown, but the drone structure is similar to that of the musette de coeur, and generically it's known as a shuttle pipe. And the reason for that is that it has sliding, if you like, shuttles similar in construction to the end part of a weaving loom. And what this does in effect is it lengthens or shortens the end of each of the drones, and in this case this is a fairly complex set. It has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sliders, 3 Ds, 3 As and an E slider. So that makes it very, very comprehensive, if you like, and it can be played with the use of interchangeable headstock. It can use chanters that play in the key of A, in the key of D, or for example, here is an example of a D chanter with an extra E key at the top, and that could be played in conjunction with this combination. I'll just show you. The other interesting thing about the instrument is it uses double-bladed reeds.
Ah, look at that now.
And these are varying in size and shape. And also, you might notice that there's what's known as a bass coupler here. Now, because the bass A should be, like the pastoral pipes, perhaps about a metre or a metre and a half long, the system allows that in the top part here, that the holes are joined top and bottom, both at either end of the instrument. And to enable the bottom A, there are 3 of the lengths of this drone section here are joined together with another 3 via the bass coupler. Hence, a very, very deep low A. And it's a very versatile and very interesting instrument, and also it's very complicated to produce, because as you can imagine, if there's a total of 12 holes here drilled in parallel, then the possibility of them joining in the middle is great indeed, and they don't have a very good success rate. And the instrument in the museum upstairs being mid-18th century, it's very difficult to imagine how, without the technology that we have nowadays, that they would be able to produce something.
Measuring it must have been extremely difficult.
And the original French instrument had a double chanter, a grand chalumeau and a petit chalumeau. And the petit chalumeau is closed and was thought to have been the precursor for the Irish uilleann regulator system. And the Grand Chalumeau, which is similar in construction to this chanter, is open and has keys, and is thought to have been the precursor for the Northumbrian small pipes.
My goodness. So that's been the source for two separate genres.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so
that chanter there.
this is part of the interchangeable. This chanter plays in A, and it's a conical chanter.
Yeah.
Whereas this is a parallel board D chanter. So all in all, a very versatile instrument.
Where was it played? In the court in France?
Yes, it was a court instrument, yes. And particularly suited to Baroque, and Verdi had composed tunes, music, and Bach.
I take it these are examples of chanters.
These are examples of bombard chanters, and chanters that could be played with this instrument and could be played together in conjunction with. So these are a few of the examples of the conical board.
This one?
This is a three-droned instrument from Galicia. This is the one that plays in the key of D, and it has. It's quite unusual in as much that the drones are in 3 octaves.
Yes.
As you can see, there's a tiny little treble drone here, and the interesting feature about these instruments is that they have on-off stop valves at the bottom, and that enables each drone to be tuned one at a time, and in this particular case in the key of D.